On behalf of the Waterbury Regional Chamber's membership and board of directors, I would like to thank both Chris and David for accepting our invitation to participate in this debate. While the media has covered your campaigns on many issues important to voters, we are pleased to host this debate, which will focus on issues important and pertinent to our region's business community. Moderating the debate today is the executive editor of the Republican American and the Sunday Republican, John Kellogg. John Kellogg is responsible for the day-to-day production of the Republican American newspapers and the news content on the newspaper's website. John is beginning his 12th year in Waterbury. That's hard to believe, John. Wow, congratulations. Prior to coming to the Republican American, he served as executive editor of the Lowell Sun in Massachusetts and was managing editor of the Portland Press Herald in Maine. He spent 16 years with the Associated Press, the world's largest news gathering agency, in both Boston and Concord, New Hampshire, serving as Northern New England bureau chief for 10 years. John is a noted lecturer on journalism ethics, a member of the Academy of New England Journalists, and past president of the New England Society of Newspaper Editors. Earlier this month, he served as a panelist in a day-long forum on the presidency and the press at the Calvin Coolidge Foundation in Woodstock, Vermont. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome John Kellogg.
Get this down to my level. Okay. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We are pleased to join you here at the Courtyard by Marriott at the invitation of the Chamber. Nothing is more essential to a democracy than an informed electorate, and we are pleased to help further that aim this afternoon. At this time, I want to more formally introduce our two candidates who are seeking the office of United States Representative for Connecticut's 5th Congressional District. Congressman Christopher S. Murphy is currently serving his first term representing Connecticut's 5th District. He serves on the Committee on Oversight and Government Reform, as well as the Financial Services Committee. Prior to his service in the U.S. House of Representatives, Congressman Murphy served for 8 years in the Connecticut General Assembly. He spent 4 years representing Southington from the 81st House District and 4 years representing the 16th Senatorial District, which includes Waterbury. Upon his arrival to the Senate, Murphy was appointed chair of the General Assembly's Public Health Committee. Chris has steered the passage of an impressive array of landmark bills advancing public health, including the state's workplace smoking ban. In 2005, Murphy succeeded in passing Connecticut's landmark Stem Cell Investment Act. Before being elected to the legislature, Chris was a member of the Southington Planning and Zoning Commission. He grew up in Connecticut, is an honors graduate of Williams College in Massachusetts and the Yukon School of Law. He resides with his wife, Kathy, in Cheshire, and their new son? Son, yes. State Senator David Cappiello is currently serving his 5th term as senator representing the 24th District towns of Danbury, Bethel, New Fairfield, and Sherman. He also served 2 terms in the Connecticut House of Representatives from Danbury's 138th District, beginning in 1994. Cappiello was elected to the State Senate in 1998. He was named Deputy Minority Leader for the Senate for the 2007-2008 legislative sessions and serves as lead Republican on the Legislative and Collective Bargaining subcommittees. He also serves as the lead Republican senator of the legislature's Internship Committee. David is a member of the Judiciary Committee as well as the Program Review and Investigations Committee. Among his accomplishments, Cappiello has served as a key member of a working group for managed care reforms that developed legislation in 1999, which led to the creation of a managed care ombudsman and expanded coverage for certain diseases. In addition, he played a significant role in the Senate Republican effort in 2001 to expand CONPACE, the state's prescription drug program for elderly and disabled. David, his wife Christine, and his 2 sons, Jack Regan and Jude Francis, reside in Danbury. The format for this afternoon's debate is as follows. As moderator, I will ask all the questions of our 2 candidates. The questions for today's debate were prepared by the Chamber staff with input from the Chamber's various committees and councils. Should time permit, we will also pose questions to candidates from today's audience. For everyone's information, the Chamber staff and I met with both candidates to determine who would begin the debate, and based on the flip of a coin, today's opening statement will be made by Mr. Murphy. Murphy will be provided 2 minutes for that statement. Mr. Cappiello then gets 2 minutes to make his opening statement. After opening statements, Mr. Murphy will be given 90 seconds to provide a response to the first question. Mr. Cappiello will then be allotted 30 seconds for a rebuttal. David Cappiello will then be allotted 90 seconds for the next question. Chris Murphy will be provided 30 seconds for a rebuttal, and so on and so forth. We'll get to about 45 minutes of that. Then will come closing statements. Mr. Cappiello will have 2 minutes, followed by Mr. Murphy. Our timers will notify the candidates at the 30-second and 10-second marks on their long answers and at the 10-second mark of their rebuttals. Let it be said that neither of you has to take the full amount of time allotted to answer any questions.
Duly noted.
The shorter your answers, the more questions we get in. Okay. Mr. Murphy, would you like to start with your opening statement, please?
Well, thank you very much, Jonathan. Thank you to the Waterbury Chamber for organizing this debate again this year, to the Republican American, AT&T, Civil One, sponsors of this debate. Thank you to all of you for taking the time out of your busy day to come down and hear from both of us. And thank you to my good friend, David Cappiello, for joining us here today. I think this is going to be an informative next hour for all of you. Let me say, first and most importantly, what an honor it has been to be able to represent this city in Washington for the past 2 years, as I was able to represent a portion of this city in the state Senate for a number of years. And I'm especially proud to represent this city during a time in which we are making great strides for the city of Waterbury. Working together, we, I think, stand on the brink of greatness for the city of Waterbury. And I looked at some examples that we've been able to work through and for together over the last 2 years. As chairman of the Public Health Committee when I was in the General Assembly, we fought hard to get a cardiac care program approved here for Waterbury and St. Mary's that brings life-saving care to people and also dollars into our 2 hospitals. When that program was threatened to be closed, we bound together as a community, the federal and state and local delegations, the business community, and we won a great victory to keep that program open. We still have much to do to make sure that that remains permanent. Just last week, we announced maybe the greatest victory in terms of federal funding ever for this city. The mayor and WDC and the chamber tasked me with going to Washington to fight for dollars to clean up brownfields and grow jobs. And we now have a $15 million grant on its way to do just that on the old Chase Brass property. But we still have challenges. Every day as I'm out knocking on doors, talking to the citizens of this city, they tell me that there's still much more work to do to grow our economy and our tax base, to make health care more affordable for the citizens of this city, and to make sure that we have a thriving economy for all the citizens of Waterbury. It's been an honor to represent this city, and I hope to be able to do it for another 2 years.
Mr. Cappiello.
Thank you, and thank you, Jonathan, to the Chamber, to AT&T, the Waterbury Rep-Am, and Civil One also and all of you for attending this debate and for putting this debate together. I do appreciate it, and I also thank my opponent, Congressman Murphy, for joining me in this debate. You know, I also want to thank the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and the National Federation of Independent Businesses, who have both endorsed my campaign because of my work over the last 14 years in Hartford to represent the business community, particularly the small business community throughout this district and hopefully soon throughout this country. 45 years ago, my father opened up a business on Main Street in Danbury. October 4th, he had his 45th anniversary. It's a jewelry store, a retailer. Now, he's had his ups and downs over those 45 years. Sometimes, like this year, it's a tough time when you're in retail. We've had years where the mall came in, it hurt him. We've had a recession in the early 1990s, and we have this happening in our economy today. But throughout those 45 years, he worked through those struggles and worked through it on his own. He didn't have help from the federal government. The federal government didn't come to bail him out. We all saw what happened last week or 2 weeks ago in Congress with the $700 billion bailout, and I think it really shows what's wrong with what's going on in Washington, D.C. right now. As a son of a small business owner and as a father of two and a husband of my beautiful wife, Christine, I know what it's like and the struggles that small business owners go through. I understand how the economy and how government can really negatively, adversely affect a business owner and a small business. And I want to run for Congress and to represent you in Congress because I know how government can get in our way. I want to be able to work with you in the city of Waterbury, like I have in the city of Danbury and the small towns surrounding Waterbury and the entire 5th District, to make sure that we're not getting in the way of business growing. We want to make sure we grow our jobs, grow our economy by lowering taxes, not raising them like my opponent has on a number of occasions, both in the state level and on the federal level.
Thank you. Okay, our first question goes to Congressman Murphy. If you are reelected to Congress this November, what will be your top 3 economic or priorities, to improve the economic well-being of the 5th Congressional District?
Well, thank you very much for that question. Our first priority has to be to stabilize right now what is a potentially hemorrhaging economy. I think we've taken some important but difficult steps to do that. But right now, as our markets continue to slide, as our credit crunch continues, Congress has to stay vigilant to make sure that that our financial industry and our financial markets still are available for small businesses to grow. That, I think, remains right now, as we speak today, one of the most important crises. But we have to try to cut costs for businesses here in Waterbury. It's a very expensive state to do business in, and there are things that we can do to make that happen. I'll start with tax burden. Congress in this last 2 years has passed $40 billion of tax cuts for small businesses, but that's not enough. We've got to take the next step to try to lower the cost of doing business with regard to taxes. We've also got to take on the twin costs of health care and energy. And every business that I've gone to in this district, whether it's Platt Brothers, Luvata, McDermott down the street, they tell us that those costs to insure their employees and to heat and run their businesses are exorbitant. I don't buy this notion that we shouldn't take on health care reform or energy reform because of the economic situation we sit in. They are even greater imperatives, and we should approach it in that manner. We need to insure more people, but the first way that we should approach this question of health care costs is trying to get the cost down for our employers, just as we should be trying to do the same thing with energy.
Senator?
Thank you. And I appreciate the Congressman's words, but I think actions speak louder than words. On the state level, both the former senator and I had very differing views on how to help small businesses and businesses throughout Connecticut. For instance, Congressman Murphy, as a state senator, supported the business entity tax. I opposed it. He supported the death tax. I opposed it. He supported a number of workers' comp and unemployment compensation increased costs for businesses in Connecticut. I opposed them. He's doing the same thing on the federal level, where he voted for the largest tax increase in history twice, which would have meant an average of $4,000 in increased taxes for small businesses throughout the country. That's not the way to grow jobs in this economy, especially when the economy is suffering the way it is right now.
Thank you. Mr. Cappiello, this question is for you. Congressional leaders are strongly suggesting that they will bring lawmakers back into session, possibly before November 4th, to vote on an economic stimulus plan. This is not the bailout, stimulus plan, that could cost about $150 billion and include spending on public works and extending unemployment benefits. Would you support such a plan?
Well, we all saw what happened with the last economic stimulus bill that was passed a number of months ago. That was, might have been a good idea by the President and by Congress, but it wasn't really well thought out. The idea that they would send checks to individuals and to couples of $600 or $1,200, thinking that that would simply stimulate the economy. But it's difficult to believe in that, to believe that you're going to send a one-time check to individuals and that will stimulate the economy, where on the other hand, some people, including my opponent, voted to permanently raise taxes on those same people. You can't have it both ways. To really stimulate the economy, businesses need to know that they can count on a government that's not going to raise their taxes, that's not going to raise their costs, that's going to get out of their way, that's going to get rid of the bureaucratic red tape that exists right now to run a business, whether in Connecticut or in Washington, D.C. In this state alone, we had 2,800 businesses close their doors in the first quarter of this year. 2,800. 67,000 businesses in Connecticut are small businesses that employ less than 20 people. But what Congress seems to think want to do is to have a one-time quick fix without looking at the long-term solution, to simply get out of the way of small businesses to do their jobs, to grow jobs, not raise taxes on them, lower taxes on them, not increase costs like the Congressman has done on the state and the federal level, but to lower their costs.
Go ahead.
I hope that on his way out you stop Senator Cappiello and ask him, when he talks about the biggest tax increase in history, what taxes he's actually talking about. It's a wonderful Republican talking point, but it's an absolute fiction. This Congress hasn't raised taxes at all over the last 2 years. It's a made-up statistic and a made-up number. Fact is, I'll support another stimulus bill if it's based on growing those jobs here locally in Waterbury, if it's based on tax cuts and lowering the cost of doing business, because that's the greatest burden here in Waterbury. I'll stand behind the $40 billion in tax cuts that we voted for small businesses, the $300 billion in tax cuts overall that we've stood for. But I'm not going to listen to these Republican talking points tell you something that's simply not true.
Okay. Congressman Murphy, if we could perhaps zero in a little bit on this. What specific steps are you willing to take to improve the plight of our regions and the district's manufacturing operations?
Sure. I think we've taken a great step forward here just in the past several weeks. What we know here in Waterbury is that there are industries and manufacturers and businesses that want to come here and locate here, but they don't have the space, because we are first a very heavily developed city, but also because we have so many brownfields, there simply isn't the room for a lot of these businesses to come to. That's why the Chamber and the WDC tasked me with going to Washington and finding money to grow industrial space, to put money into brownfields remediation. And that's why we're all celebrating today that we are about to have that ability to grow potentially hundreds of jobs at least one site, the Chase Brass site. Secondly, we've got to understand how our trade policies have contributed to the decline of jobs and manufacturing jobs here. Our unwillingness to get tough with a country like China that not only undercuts our labor and environmental standards, but also manipulates its own currency is part of the problem. We are going to have a fair but free trade policy that helps jobs here in this city. And then I'd come right back to the specifics of taxes. I think that we can do so much more to cut the cost of doing business with regard to tax burden, with regard to health care costs, and with regard to energy costs.
Senator?
Thank you. First of all, the tax information that I have given you is not false. Those tax increases will take place under the Congressman's own pay-go rules in 2010. They have proposed budgets and voted for budgets that would absolutely get rid of the 2001 and 2003 tax cuts. That would be a massive tax increase for the people in this room and for small businesses throughout the district. And I think another area where we can help small businesses grow is to have real comprehensive energy reform. And we're going to talk more about this in a little bit. But the Congressman voted a number of times to stop offshore drilling, which is essential right now in an oil-based economy.
Okay. Mr. Cappiello, employers around here are finding it increasingly difficult to find employees with the appropriate skill sets to help them run their businesses. What would you do as a member of Congress to improve basic educational levels as well as requisite technical skills for high school graduates?
Well, one area that I can talk about that I've worked on the state level is working with my local technical school, Henry Abbott Tech, and been able to, it's really one of the first magnet schools in the state of Connecticut, by training young people to get involved in the technical field. So we have a trained workforce here in Connecticut. But again, I come back to what is Congress doing right now? What is the emphasis of Congress and Congressman Murphy when we're looking at trying to grow jobs in this country? There's been a strong difference in our records on the state level, and there, I'm sure, would be on the federal level when it comes to trying to grow jobs within our state of Connecticut. Now, it was policies that were put forth by Congressman Murphy on the state level that helped drive jobs out of Connecticut. Some people think that there's an electric fence around our state. Some people think that no matter what we do, it's not going to affect us here in Connecticut, that people aren't going to leave. What we've found in the last 15 years, the only job sector in Connecticut that's grown is the government job sector. Private companies aren't coming here. They're being pushed away. They're being pushed away because of policies like voting for workers' compensation cost increases, like voting for unemployment compensation cost increases, like voting for a death tax, like voting for a business entity tax. You can't simply say you're for the small business owner and yet vote the other way time and time again, Congressman.
Mr. Murphy.
We're probably about 10 minutes into this debate, and you've heard about 80% of the time that Senator Cappiello has spent attacking me, and you've heard about 20% of the time talking about anything positive that he might do. I hope that we can spend a little bit of this time hearing about what your vision is instead of about your critique of what Congress has not done. This time is serious enough that we need some real solutions, like the ones that we delivered for workers in our industries here by cutting the cost of college. The biggest reduction in the cost of college since the GI Bill was passed, with the College Affordability Act passed by both houses with bipartisan support signed by that president. That was a solution where we work together instead of simply spending all of our time yelling at each other, which it appears that you're prepared to spend the rest of the next 45 minutes doing.
Okay. Congressman Murphy, you both have acknowledged that Connecticut is indeed an expensive state in which to operate a business. Healthcare costs as well as energy are making it increasingly difficult to keep a business, particularly a small business, profitable. As our duly elected representatives in Congress, what specific steps will you take to wean our nation off its dependence on fossil fuels extracted in foreign lands?
Sure. This is probably the most important and most central question to the future of this country is how do we get ourselves off of our addiction to products that are produced outside of this country, and how do we make ourselves truly energy independent? Because it's about lowering the cost of energy, it's about cleaning up the environment, it's about making our foreign policy about our national security needs, not our national energy needs, and it's about growing jobs. We have a great potential here in Waterbury, but throughout this district, to be able to grow green jobs based on a renewable energy economy. We've taken some steps to do that. The House passed this fall, legislation that would increase the tax incentives for renewable energy production, that would create a national standard for renewable energy development, and would increase our ability to bring fossil fuels off of our own territory here by expediting leases that can be available in the Gulf of Mexico, off the Alaskan shores, and also increasing our ability to do that off the Atlantic coast. But let's be clear, Senator Cappiello will spend the next 30 seconds talking about drilling. We can't drill ourselves out of this problem. We have 3% of the world's oil reserves, and we use 25% of the world's energy. It has to be a part of the solution, and I was one of the people that pressed our leadership to come to the table and come up with a compromise on that issue. But it is only a part of the solution that has to be based primarily on the issue of renewable domestically produced energy.
Thank you. Mr. Cappiello.
Thank you. And Congressman, if you think that was yelling, you haven't really seen me get upset. That wasn't yelling. That was debating. Because when you've been in Congress, you ran for Congress 2 years ago, criticizing your opponent. You said it was time for a change. In the past 2 years, what has changed? In the past 2 years, 2 years ago, you said that you were going to have a dividing wall between PACs, lobbyists, and Congress, and your biggest contributors are from the financial institutions, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, Countrywide, AIG, the same people that you just helped bail out. Now, I hope we have another chance to talk about my plan for renewable energies and for my plan that I came out with months ago before you even responded to your speaker about their lack of a plan.
Okay, well, Mr. Cappiello, this question is for you, so why don't you dive right in and tell us what your energy plan is.
Thank you very much. A few months ago, I had come up with my own comprehensive energy plan that, yes, is based right now immediately on drilling. We have to be realistic and pragmatic about the kind of economy that we have right now. It's an oil-based economy, and we need to be able to drill offshore. We need to be able to drill out west. That is a more immediate solution to what's going on right now. We saw what happened to gas and oil prices this past summer. We cannot see that happen again. Now, having said that, we should also be looking at incentives for individuals and businesses to conserve. We should be looking at putting more incentives into growing our greener energy solutions for solar power, wind power. We should be looking at natural gas resources, but we haven't. This Congress, for 2 years, almost 2 years in the majority, decided to do nothing and to simply vote no against offshore drilling. Now, it's true, the congressman did send a letter on August 14th to the majority leader saying that we should look at offshore drilling. That was after 2 weeks after he voted, it was a deciding vote by a 213 to 212 margin to go on vacation early and then not have an energy debate at all. And then when Nancy Pelosi was on Larry King the night before saying we can open it up to some offshore drilling, the next day the congressman followed suit. The one thing you'll know about me in the last number of years that I've served in Hartford, and you'll know about me if I get elected to Congress, I don't simply listen to my legislative and leaders and party leaders. I do what I think is right, and sometimes that's standing up to my own leadership, even when it's uncomfortable to do. But that's why you elect us to Congress, not to follow our leader, to stand up to them, and that's what you'll find in me.
Well, Senator Cappiello has his own interpretation of the events, but those of us that pressed our leadership to come to the table and engage in a compromise on drilling, we're doing just that, standing up to our leadership and changing our policy on that issue. But your answer begins and ends with drilling. And I'll just come back to this. I think that Congress should step forward and increase the amount of drilling we do, but your solution to energy problems can't start and end with a product that is only going to make up a small portion of domestically produced energy that is only going to help us 5 years to 10 years down the line. That's the Bush administration telling us that. That's not my estimates. Our national energy strategy has to be based on domestic renewable resources, and anybody's energy plan has to start and end with that.
If I might, this is an important issue, if I might. It doesn't end with that, but it has to begin with that. Again, we are an oil-based economy, Congressman. We can't change overnight. When senior citizens are struggling to pay their energy bills and they can't go in their car because they can't fill up their tank, when young couples like you and I have young children, I have a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old, you have a 2-month-old, we can't simply turn the heat down at night. There has to be the immediate solution. And then, yes, we should be looking for longer, greener energy solutions. That will be the end product. But we've got to start with being realistic, and that's what I'm trying to do.
Mr. Murphy?
Thank you. And if we're really talking about short-term energy solutions, which we need to be, I mean, this is a critical issue this winter for our families and for seniors throughout this state who are struggling with the cost of energy costs. It's not going to be a new oil rig permitted through an act of Congress passed this year. That is 5 to 10 years out. What we need to be doing is releasing the oil that we right now have in the ground in the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. We need to be taking a look at the commodity markets where the price of oil is being escalated and de-escalated. And we need to be investing in low-income heating assistance for those same seniors. I was proud to lead the effort on behalf of the New England delegation to get new money, millions more to this state for that heating assistance. Those are the things that in the short term, if we're really worried about the short term, that help us. I'm proud to be part of brokering a compromise on the issue of drilling, but I also understand that that is a long-term solution, not a short-term solution.
Okay, change the topic for a minute. This question is for you, Mr. Murphy. The demographic complexion of the 5th District is changing, particularly in urban centers, Waterbury, Danbury, Bristol, New Britain. What is your position with regard to a sound immigration policy that assists, not hinders, the region's businesses?
Sure. This is a critical issue for this district and the whole country. And I'll be honest with you, it's one of my disappointments that Congress hasn't been able to step up to the plate and pass immigration reform. I believe that it has to be a realistic, compassionate, and comprehensive approach. I believe that it starts with border patrol and border security. I'm proud that this Congress has put $2 billion additional dollars into fencing along the borders and 5,000 more border agents. It extends to enforcing the laws that are on the books today and giving employers the tools to enforce it themselves with real ID programs. And it continues to a realistic solution to the number of people that are here today. I do believe that there has to be some pathway for those people that are here who have stayed for a portion of time, who have played by the rules, to at least get in line and be able to apply for citizenship. Senator Cappiello is going to call that by names and oppose it. I think that As long as we are not able to get over that issue about what we do with the 12 million people that are here, we're not going to get an immigration reform bill. And fourthly, we have to fix existing immigration laws. We have to make sure that the existing immigration system fulfills our labor needs adequately, both for permanent workers and for seasonal workers, and it doesn't stand as a barrier to people who have to sometimes wait 8 to 10 years to get into this country legally. But we have to take the politics and the accusations out of this, and we have to come together and try to forge a compromise between Republicans and Democrats that gets this issue right.
Senator?
Thank you. And Congressman, just to remind you, you are Congress. This Congress has refused to act on anything in the last 2 years. I know that you said the saddest day in your first year in Congress was the failure of the Ted Kennedy, President Bush Immigration Act, but I opposed that bill for a number of reasons. First, we absolutely have to secure our borders, and I know that a number of times that you have voted to gut our border security. You decided to vote against funding the fence that the people wanted to put up that was voted on in 2006. You and I have a difference in policy with regards to illegal aliens who are here regarding driver's licenses. In the state level, you voted 3 times to allow illegal aliens who are here to have driver's licenses. I did not. I know that you had voted on the state level to allow illegal aliens to have in-state tuition at our colleges and universities. I opposed that bill. We simply disagree on the manner in which to deal with this issue. Yes, we have to secure our borders, absolutely. And yes, he's right. I don't support amnesty. I believe in the rule of law. I believe that people follow the law for a reason. If we're going to have immigration laws in place, and we're going to say we're going to lay down the rule of law, how do we then say that 12 million people that are here illegally, you're okay, we're going to give you amnesty? I don't support that. It's an area that I disagree with my president and, frankly, my presidential nominee for office right now, John McCain. Again, I think it's important that when you elect someone, that they stand up for the people in their district, not simply toe the party line. I've stood up to Senator McCain, and I know that you've mentioned George Bush a few times and President Bush on a number of occasions.
I don't know that I've mentioned Bush yet. The issue of amnesty, I mean, I know that's a politically charged word that polls well, but that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about setting up a process by which a portion of the people that are here can apply for citizenship, get in line, and be able to stay here permanently. That is a process that should have very high barriers to it. It is not amnesty, which is the idea of just immediately making legal something that's illegal. And I will tell you that my position is supported by the majority of business organizations that lobby Congress, because they know that in order to fulfill some of our labor needs in this country, we're going to need to address this issue that exists right now of the 12 million workers who are not legal.
Do you have a rebuttal?
Sure. Again, if you're giving someone the ability to become a citizen, anyone can apply for citizenship. People who are illegally illegal, they can apply for citizenship, but they have to get into line for people who have applied the legal way. People who are struggling to get here. It's the American dream. Let's face it. Everyone throughout the world, they know America is the greatest country on earth. My grandparents on the Lebanese side and the Italian side, they both wanted to come here, but they did it legally. What kind of message are we sending by giving amnesty to those people who are coming here illegally? What message does that send to people who have fought to get here the right way, or those throughout the world who are fighting to get here the legal way?
Mr. Cappiello, one of the most formidable challenges facing Congress is the future of the Social Security system. As more and more baby boomers mature to retirement, what is your plan for solving this complex and costly problem?
Well, first, I think that Congress should stop raiding, and the administration should stop raiding the Social Security fund. Back in the 1960s, it was a habit that they started and they couldn't get off of. They were used to it. I think it's important for Congress and the administration both to work together to start funding its current obligations before spending new money on future promises. Now, I know that my opponent and many people in both parties keep making promises for funding for this program or for that program, but we know that back in the 1950s, 16 workers paid for 1 worker. Now we're looking at 2 workers paying for 1 worker in the Social Security system. We've got to put everything on the table, try and have a real debate, and make some tough choices. Because I'll tell you what, it's one thing that Congress and people in elected office on the state level as well don't need to do is make tough choices. On the state level, I'll tell you what I've done with the Teachers Pension Fund, and I can apply that to how I would work to fund the Social Security program. Now, for 30 years, the Teachers Pension Fund was unfunded. it was funded by 85% out of 100%. Every year they were unfunding it. And then eventually there were budgets that were voted on that brought that funding down to 80%, 75%, 64%, budgets that I didn't support that my opponent did. Now, I thought it was unfathomable that we had a $7 billion unfunded liability and that we were saying we're going to keep voting for budgets and underfunding that system. I think Congress needs to start looking at putting money back into Social Security instead of raiding it before we do anything else. I know there are proposals on the table to raise taxes on small business owners, to raise the amount at which we pay Social Security tax. That's something that I do not support. That should be the absolute last thing that we do to fix the system.
I mean, if you want to talk about being able to make tough choices, it's hard to stand there and say, I'm willing to make tough choices, but I'm not willing to discuss more revenue or less expenditure in the Social Security system. I mean, there are only so many tools that we have at our disposal to save the system for the long term. And I think it's somewhat irresponsible for anybody in Congress or outside of Congress to say that we're going to take off the table all of those tools within the Social Security system. The fact is that we do need to restore money in there, but I'm still waiting to hear for a plan. I'm waiting to hear for how you do that. We can't continue to spend $10 billion a month in Iraq if we want to put money into Social Security. We may not be able to extend the entirety of the Bush tax cuts if we want to save Social Security. There are tough choices that are made here. Our federal bureaucracy may have to be smaller in order to sustain that. I'm perfectly willing, even given potential political exposure on those issues, to say that it should be part of our discussion. But it's not enough to just say that we should make tough choices and get it done. You have to say what you'd actually do.
Well, and if I may, Congressman, you've been there for 2 years. You made these same statements 2 years ago. What have you done to fix the system?
Sure. The very notion right now that we are attempting, one, to get this war under control. We've passed bill after bill sent to the President's desk to stop spending this type of money overseas. The fact that we've put into place for the first time the pay-as-you-go rule, which says that Congress, anytime it spends money, has to come up within the context of that bill the money to pay for it, an offset on the revenue side or the expenditure side, has imposed fiscal discipline that allows us to pass a budget that will be balanced within the next 4 years. So this Congress has taken, I think, very important steps to make up for the excess of your party and of your president. It was President Bush that put this country from a record surplus into a record deficit. It's been the Republican Congress that ran up the deficit so that we now have borrowed in the last 7 years more money than we had borrowed during the entire history of this republic. There's a lot of work to make up for that, but I'll stand by what we've done to start to make sense of it.
And if I may, Congressman, in that last statement that you made, you just admitted that you don't support the 2001 and 2003 tax cuts, and you voted to make them go away. So with your statement earlier that you didn't vote for tax increases, now you've shown that you do support the tax increases. And the pay-go system is a system where you pay as you go. It's a great concept. The problem is your own Congress hasn't followed that system. $700 billion that was just voted for a couple of weeks ago. Did you have a pay-go system with that bill, Congressman?
Let me move on to the next question here. You guys are prescient. Just about every question I have, you've anticipated.
We appreciate the leeway.
Congressman Murphy, regarding the federal bailout of Wall Street and the banking industry, why did you vote to approve this bill? And Senator Cappiello, when we get to you, how would you have voted and why?
Sure. This, to me, is a question of how do we prevent a financial crisis such as we have not seen since the 1930s from descending so that it becomes an unavoidable crisis right here on Bank Street and Main Street here in Waterbury. This is not about bailing out Wall Street. This is about saving our local economy. Now, it probably would have been very easy for me to just walk away from this thing and say, you know what, I wasn't there when we got into this mess, and the politically easy vote for me is just to vote against it. I opposed the plan that the President put before us, a 3-page plan that basically had no oversight, had no checks on their power. And instead of walking away from the discussion, I decided to enter it and to try to make the bill better for all of us. That's why we have CEO pay limits for people and companies that participate in the program. That's why we have provision to require that taxpayers are treated like investors when we invest in these companies. And that's why we have a provision to make sure that we get paid back the full amount from Wall Street within 5 years. Listen, this was not a fun vote to take. But this was the responsible vote. If I pay a political price for it, if I lose my seat over it, so be it. I think it was the right thing to do for our economy here in Waterbury. And I'm still, a week after the bill's passage, waiting for Senator Cappiello to offer something more than a criticism. I'm waiting for him to offer a real plan, not a Band-Aid fix, but a real plan to get us out of this mess.
Senator?
Well, the first thing that I would do, if I were you, Congressman, is I would give back the $250,000 in special interest funds from Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, Countrywide, AIG, and all of those groups that lobby you every single day in Congress. 2 years ago, when you ran for office, you were very critical of Nancy Johnson for accepting pharma money, pharmaceutical industry money, people who do provide jobs in the state, and you said that's why she voted for Medicare Part D. But now you want it both ways. They're your biggest fundraising source right now as an incumbent congressman, and you voted for this bailout. And you're right, I will give you this. You were absolutely right. What the president did was irresponsible by putting a 3-page document on the desk of Congress for $700 billion. I mean, that is irresponsible, and I agree with you. But I also agree that when Congress turned it into a 450-page document, there should have been given more thought. There should have been more debate on the issue. There should have been more work. There were options that were put on the table by other members of Congress, like letting Wall Street insure itself and then having the Treasury Department back that insurance plan, instead of having taxpayers bail out Wall Street. This is $700 billion that you and I are paying for, that my children are going to be paying for, their children are going to be paying for. And, you know, there wasn't enough thought to it. The first bill was bad enough, but the second bill had all this pork in it. You know, tax breaks for wooden arrows, a $126 million tax break for NASCAR, tax breaks for rum dealers. What does that have to do with the bailout of Wall Street? What does that have to do with 401k investors? It has nothing to do with it whatsoever. Congress and the president should have taken more time. This is a very serious issue. We've gone in the last 20 months from $9.5 trillion debt to almost $11.5 trillion after this bailout bill is funded. That's just simple, irresponsible funding and budgeting.
Well, let me press you one more time. I still haven't, I mean, you took a minute or so to answer that question and still didn't offer any suggestions on what you would do instead. I understand that you're angry about this. I'm just as angry about it, about being put in this position. But people in this district, as I'm going business to business and door to door, want to know what their congressman is going to do about it, not just what their congressman is angry about. And I do have to respond to this notion of the money that I've taken from the financial services industry. I mean, I think you have to be a little careful to throw stones from glass houses, Senator Cappiello, because you've taken $200,000 from those same industries. You've actually taken a greater percentage of your campaign funds than I have. We live in Connecticut. There are people here who work for banks and who work for insurance companies, many of them sitting in this room. And to say that they don't deserve an opportunity to donate to their member of Congress, I frankly think is a little insulting to those people. So I just think you got to be careful when you're making these accusations that you should probably check your own campaign's bank accounts first.
Actually, I have. And I was looking through them when you made that comment. That you're right. There are individuals who have given me money that I'm very proud of their support. Some friends that do mortgages, some friends that are in the financial markets. But Fannie Mae wasn't on my disclosure form. Freddie Mac wasn't on my disclosure form. AIG, Countrywide, not on my disclosure form. And I have to tell you, it's beyond me that Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, that are quasi-government agencies, are even able to lobby and give donations to incumbent members of Congress. Now, I will tell you right here and now that we should lead by example as a congressman or woman, whoever's in office. I am going to lead by example. I am telling you that if you elect me, I am not going to take any money from the special interest down in Washington, D.C. Not because they're necessarily evil, but because I want my vote to be pure. Now, 2 years ago, you set the standard when you ran against Nancy Johnson, and you said that her money was tainted, that she was in the pockets of special interest groups. There should be a dividing wall between special interest PACs and lobbyists in Congress. But so far, you've blown through that wall and raised almost $1 million from special interests. I don't know how you can have it both ways, Congressman.
Well, Senator Cappiello, you could start now by deciding not to take money from, this isn't me talking, this is numbers that come from nonpartisan groups. And let's get down to the bottom of this. I mean, the suggestion is that somehow money that I've taken from individuals in this room or the companies they work for has somehow prejudiced my vote. I take offense at that. And I hope that anyone in this room or anyone that has met me in my time in politics know that couldn't be true. And so, I'll just cut right to the heart of it. I frankly have been a vocal advocate for campaign finance reform in a way, Senator Cappiello, that you have not. I believe that we should get special interest money completely out of politics. I voted for the state campaign finance reform bill. You did not. I voted for the state contractor reform bill. You did not. I voted for the state ethics reform bill. You did not. I've been a constant voice for the reform of government. And on those three bills, Senator Cappiello is the only member of the state Senate who voted against all three of them. So I'll stand up my record of reform against anybody's.
Well, and if I may, on the taxpayer-funded campaigns, you're absolutely right. I don't support that. And obviously, neither does your presidential nominee, Barack Obama. We saw how that system is completely flawed because he signed a pledge and said I was going to be a part of the taxpayer-funded system, but you can't force someone into that system. Now, I did vote for a number of bills on the state level to say no PACs, no lobbyists whatsoever. I voted for those. You voted against them. I also voted to limit the number of months that we as state senators can raise money for, amendments that I supported that you did not. So we have a different way to get around campaign finance reform. I don't believe that taxpayers should be paying for your and my campaign. But remember, Congressman, you set the standard 2 years ago. You pointed the finger at Nancy Johnson and talked about there being a dividing wall between PACs, lobbyists, and Congress. You said that her votes were tainted. You can't make those accusations and then receive $1 million in PAC contributions and say that your votes aren't tainted. You set the standard. You have to live by them.
Okay. We're going to try to sneak one more question in. This one is for you, Senator. In light of the financial bailout, what specific federal programs would you cut or put on hold to pay for this bailout?
I will give you one very specific item that might not be so popular in this room because of what the Congressman just brought back last week to Waterbury. I believe that we should eliminate completely the earmark system as we know it. Now, it's a small piece. It's only $20 to $40 billion a year that we're talking about, but it's something that needs to be reformed. The earmark system is a system that is based upon who's in power. If you're a congressman or woman, you can put a piece into a bill, any bill, without any public hearing process, without any vetting process, without any criteria whatsoever, and get that funding. Now, that's great every once in a while if you bring it back to your community. It's not a bad thing if it's a good project. But what is the overall cost? What are you voting for to get that project back? Are you voting for that bridge to nowhere? Are you voting for Charlie Rangel's bill? He's a current congressman from New York City who put in a few $1 million to have a building named after himself in his district. Are you voting for that? Some people are. Some people have. I wouldn't. The whole system, I think, is corrupt and it's irresponsible. We should get rid of that. If Congress can't reform itself, how can it reform any outside systems if it can't reform itself? I don't know the answer to that.
Congressman, any specific programs?
Sure. Number one, the biggest expense that we've taken on in the last several years is the cost of this war. $10 billion a month that we're spending on a war that, frankly, I believe, we haven't talked about it today, but I think it has great relevance to the city of Waterbury. It's a war that makes this country less safe, not more safe, and takes money away from our efforts to pay down our debt and to invest in programs here. With regard to earmarks, we luckily have some data to compare Senator Cappiello's record and my record on this issue. When we were in the state legislature, we did earmarking there too. What we called bonding requests. The only difference was you borrowed it rather than took it out of the federal budget. During the 8 years that Senator Cappiello and I were both in the state legislature, Senator Cappiello requested 5 times as many earmarks as I did. I appreciate him joining our crusade to try to get rid of earmarks ultimately, but I think we do have to look at his record and my record during our time in the legislature to understand whether or not we are truly committed to reducing the number of earmarks.
Okay. And just to be clear, so people know the difference between the state and the federal government, when you propose a piece of legislation on the state level, it goes to a committee, you have a public hearing on that. And yes, I have proposed ideas that Congressman Murphy calls earmarks, but it's to have a public hearing to see whether the project is worthwhile, to have a vetting process. But what earmarks are on the federal level is simply, I've got the power, I'm not having a hearing on it, I'm not proposing a bill on it, I'm sneaking into a bill in the darkness of night. And that's what often happens. Now, the Congressman 2 years ago was vigilant about earmark reform. But since he's been down there, he's requested $500 million in earmarks. That's not reform. One more area, and this might not be popular, it might not get me elected, but I am telling you, I'm going to lead by example. I am not going to request earmarks, because if you're going to take a stand against what's wrong with Washington, with Congress, with the administration, you have to lead by example. That's what I will do.
I guess it's hard to me to understand how, if you are earmarking bonding money to be spent on a particular project, how that's not earmarking. And secondly, Senator Cappiello, we have made dramatic changes. There are no more middle-of-the-night earmarks. This Congress immediately set into practice a process by which all earmarks had to be transparent and everybody's name had to be attached to them. In addition, in the first year this Congress took control of the budget process, we cut earmarks in half, a process and a tool that was blown out of proportion by the Republican Congress. So there have been some pretty important steps that have been taken. But I'll tell you, until they're gone, I'm not going to stop fighting for money for my district. I'm not going to take $15 million out of the hands of a city that is desperately looking to revitalize its economic development structure. I am in a fight to get rid of those earmarks, but while they exist, I don't think that our money should be going to other cities and other states. I think that we should get a little piece of it.
All right, Senator, I'm
sorry, there were two votes in Congress.
You had two bites at the apple, please.
But there were two chances you had,
This is a time debate. We're going to run out of time. If you want to forego your closing statement and continue to argue, I suppose we can let you do that.
I would be happy to do that. Thank you.
All right.
Congressman, you had two chances to vote for a moratorium on earmarks to fix the system. You chose to vote no both times. It's very difficult for a congressman to go to Washington and say they're going to make a change, they're going to be different, but then fall right into line with everyone else that's down there. I think it's important for an individual, if they're going to really make a stand, if they're going to really make a difference in Washington, D.C., they have to lead by example. And I'm telling you, I will do that if you elect me to Congress. Now, you're right. I'm not going to get that $15 million project. I won't do it, because there are a lot of members of Congress who have taken that stand. Senator John McCain has taken that stand. The only way we're going to really make a difference is for me to say, I'm going to do what's right for America. Because if it's right for America, it's right for Waterbury, it's right for Danbury and Sherman and Sharon, Connecticut. It's right for our district. And we have to understand the overall cost. If I'm getting a project for my district, am I voting for that bridge to nowhere? Am I voting for that Charlie Rango building? The answer in many cases is yes. I won't do that. I've been able to stand up to my own leaders in Hartford when it was uncomfortable on a number of occasions. I voted against 4 of the last 7 budgets because we were spending too much money under Republican governors. We need people to take a stand down there, not to go down there and say, well, the system's too big to fix right away. I'm just going to go along to get along. I won't do that. But Congressman, I think that you have.
Okay, thank you. Congressman Murphy, would you care to make a closing statement, or do you want to respond?
No, I'll make a closing statement because I'd like to thank the Chamber for giving us this opportunity. And I'd like to say that I hope that the rest of the campaign doesn't sound like this debate. I mean, I hope that the rest of the campaign is about my vision for how we fix this country. And I hope Senator Cappiello, over the next 3 weeks, gives us the opportunity for him to share his vision. Because I don't think you've heard that today. I'll stand by my vote on the economic rescue bill. I'll stand by the work that I've done on ethics reform, on campaign finance reform, on earmark reform. But I want to engage in a conversation about how we make this city better and the state better. And frankly, I don't think that's serviced by debates in which Senator Cappiello can't get through his opening remarks without attacking his opponent. Let's spend the next couple weeks talking about how we make this city better, how we clean up even more brownfields in the city of Waterbury, how we allow for struggling businesses right around the corner to survive. Let's talk about our positive vision instead of throwing around accusations. This is a tough time. I get it. People are struggling. There's a lot of reason to be angry. But you don't send me to Congress to be just angry. You send me to Congress to express your outrage in positive changes for our community. So my hope is that that's what the rest of this campaign is about, because I think in this crisis there lies opportunity. People are struggling today, but we can reform an economy based on the middle class and the manufacturing jobs that made this country great. We can get a healthcare system that covers everybody and costs less. We can get an energy policy that makes this country no longer hostage to people who make energy overseas. I do have a little boy at home, and I hope that what he sees from the politics of the next few weeks and what he sees of the politics of the next 60 years of his life is one about positive vision, not about attacks. I thank the Chamber very much for having us here today.
Thank you, Congressman Murphy and Senator Cappiello. I've done a few of these debates, and I'm sorry we're up against the clock here. I think there's more to be said between you gentlemen. On behalf of the Waterbury Regional Chamber, thank you for participating. We wish you both good luck on November 4th and continued success. To our debate sponsors, Civil One, AT&T, and the Republican American, thank you for your generous contributions to make this event possible, and much continued success to you as well. To our audience, thank you for joining us today as we count down to Election Day on November 4th. On October 28th, the Chamber will be hosting a presidential policy briefing. You won't want to miss that either. Debating the issues will be the incumbent Democratic Senate candidate Ned Lamont, representing the Obama campaign, and Republican Chair Chris Healy backing the McCain campaign. Thank you, and don't forget to vote.